this speech has got a long title, which I was unable to recall yesterday. That is why the first slide has been left blank. It is not only long, but so pretentious. Anyway, if necessary, I will type it later. And I have structured the proposed speech into 4 parts. The first one is a little bit theoretical. It discusses taxonomy and the role that taxonomy, classification, plays in the production of knowledge. The second one consists of 2 examples which show how excessive obsession with taxonomy can distort, influence, and maybe even subvert the very project of knowledge production. The third one focuses on our text Ratirahasya, which was composed somewhere in the 9th or 10th centuries. And the last one, in order to clinch the argument, I have borrowed a few instances from indigenous cultural practices. So these are the 4 sections. Now, again, the purpose of this presentation is very simple. It merely introduces a work which is likely to be already familiar to some of us, maybe most of us, because I do remember as a child when we visited temples during festival seasons, I have seen this book, Kogoga Shastram. Very small in size, consisting of 30-35 pages in gaudy colors. But those days, we never realized its content or historical value. So, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is a term very much used in sciences, more specifically life sciences. If you go to a department of botany, they are talking about taxonomy and taxonomical practices most of the time. So it is one of the foundations of knowledge production all over the world, and most points of time we are familiar with. But again, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, if you get stuck with any taxonomical framework, it can cause a lot of disruptive effects. And we will just have a look at 1 or 2 examples. This is a real picture. The name of this person is Joseph Merrick. He lived in the 19th century. And in 1980 or 81, David Lynch directed a movie called The Elephant Man. And this is not a shot from the movie, but the real picture of Joseph Merrick. In the movie, the person appears as John Merrick. There is a slight change in the name. Apart from that, almost all the events are true to it. And the movie is based on this work, written by Dr. Travis. It was Dr. Travis who accidentally found this pitiable character and took him under his wings. And the next picture can be a bit more scandalous. This is the picture of a woman. Her name was Sarah Bartman. She was from Africa, and she was popularly known as the Hottentot Venus. Hottentot is a derogatory term. At least these days, it is politically incorrect. She belonged to a certain tribe, and the most outstanding physical feature of this woman, as you can see, is unusually big buttocks. And what might have happened to such a woman? She was trapped, she was brought into England, and she was paraded completely naked in London and other places. Please remember, we often consider Victorian, just think about other Victorian women. How did they dress? They resemble our Kathakali performers, with multi-layers of clothing, and they would fall unconscious every now and then. Whenever a harsh word or event is mentioned, they are supposed to fall down because a woman was considered delicate and sensitive. During the same period, these Victorians didn't find any problem in parading a woman stark naked in a cage. And people were excited to see her from as many angles as possible. Why did this happen? How would you and of course, Victorian England is notorious for freak shows. These days, a freak is considered not abnormal, but simply different. Not abnormal, plainly different. That is why the word physically handicapped has disappeared from our terminology. Instead, we use the word differently abled. We don't call anyone blind. We call them visually challenged. At last we have come to understand that there is no such thing as normalcy. That is why we have accepted the so-called transgenders. Last year, there were 2 transgender students in my class. I was their tutor. And to be frank, I was so upset before the commencement of the class. I thought something serious was going to happen. I tried my best not to go to the class on lame excuses, but nothing worked. So at last, I was forced to the class. And to my great surprise, I found that I was the only person worried about the presence of these persons. Every other student was perfectly calm and comfortable. For them, it was nothing. Then I realized I am old. I belong to a generation which is very much concerned with unhealthy moralities and normative structures and so on. Our students who are 17 or 18, belonging to rich, elite, educated families, were much more receptive and comfortable and flexible. This clearly indicates a shift from one generation to another. Okay, let us come. We are not going to discuss transgenders. What happened was that in the 19th century, science was very much concerned with the study of anatomy. So all these freaks, the word is freak, and Victorian England was notorious for freak shows. If there was a so-called deformity in your body, you will end up not in an asylum, but in a freak show. And you will be cased and taken all over England. Paris was another place where freak shows were extremely popular. So, freak shows, I would like to argue, were based on a dichotomy. The belief that people could be neatly divided into formed and deformed. All of us are formed, all of us are normal, whereas there are some others who are deformed, who are abnormal. And why are some people born normal? Because of God's decision. If I have no deformity, no disability, it shows I am well within God's grace and providence. If that is not the case with me, I am incurring the punishment of maybe the sins of my previous death. But in Christianity, I understand previous and future births do not matter very much. Anyway, they were simply out of God's grace. And that seems to be the abstract machine, the ideational undercurrent between the Victorian obsession with freaks. By looking at the so-called freaks, most of the Victorians found solace in the fact that we are in the right framework. We are God's own children. Maybe they were devil's children. And interestingly, devil hasn't caused any problem in the world. No one has fought in the name of devil so far. Right. That's a funny paradox. It's every time is in the name of God or gods. This is a brief write-up on what happened to this particular woman, taken from the book Racism. It is a part of Oxford University Press's very short introduction, VSI, written by one Ali Retency. It's a book, personally, I would recommend to every student of literature and history, because it talks precisely but accurately about how racism was and is at play. Now, we will move to the next set of examples. There are 2 or 3. These 2 figures are very familiar, at least the second one, the person who sports a long beard, it is Charles Darwin. And the other fellow is his half-cousin, Francis Galton. Both of them hailed from similar backgrounds. They received similar kind of education, more or less. But their outlook on life couldn't have been more different. You know, in the 19th century, Europe, England, and America witnessed an influx of refugees, people from other places. And this sight bewildered Francis Galton. He always sincerely believed that the white race was superior to any other people. And he tried to establish the superiority, moral and ethical and intellectual superiority of the white population. But the same scenario produced a different effect on Charles Darwin. He was so excited to see the diversity of life. He was a person who would celebrate differences. Both of them traveled a lot, and we know what happened to Darwin. At the end of his famous voyage, he produced a book Origin of Species, which is considered the most important work in the history of humankind by many thinkers because it inaugurated a new era. It ushered in a new paradigm. People couldn't simply think as they did before the publication of this work when it was printed. But the case of Francis Galton was completely different. And we will take one more example. By the way, I forgot to mention this. In 2011, there appeared a rather interesting book, Darwin's Sacred Cows. It talks about the theory of evolution, but it focuses more on the social aspects and implications of origin of species. The argument is rather simple. Charles Darwin considered human beings as one unit. And by proposing the theory of evolution, he was indirectly but powerfully negating the very idea of race. See, if all of us were born from the same source over a period of millennia, how can there be any difference between us? If at all there were differences, those differences were only skin deep, superficial, what you call phenotypical. Genotypically, all the human beings are one and the same. And have a look at the words once again. Darwin's sacred cause, race, slavery, and quest for human origins. The quest for human origins was instilled in Darwin not because of scientific inquiries alone, but because he realized one simple fact which most of us fail to realize, that ultimately we are one and the same. Instead of quarreling in the name of religion, ethnicity, and such other petty things, why can we do something better, sensible, something that makes us happy? At least we can have a cup of tea instead of quarreling over petty religious matters. And the authors, there are two, they argued that Darwin was one person who had the sagacity to realize this fact. And the last example, again, two familiar figures. The second one should be familiar to all of us. His name is Christian Bernard, who is supposed to have, I am deliberately using these words, supposed to have performed the first heart transplantation, because there is a theory that the surgery was actually carried by a person with black origins. Not that I buy it, but theoretically it is possible. You know, it was in South Africa, which was very notorious for strict regimentation in terms of race. We call it the apartheid. And during the apartheid era, lived both of them, Bowson and Bernard. Both of them were doctors. But what did Bernard do? He performed heart surgeries, and I am not very sure about this information because I read it a few months ago. In his third or fourth transplantation, he had the courage to, insert, to fix a black man's heart in the body of a white man, without the white man's knowledge. So he was sending a simple message. You may be black or white or red, but ultimately we are all human beings, and he was a doctor. And what about the other doctor? He was a cardiologist too, but he worked hand in hand with the apartheid government, and he tried his best to devise medicines and chemicals and other things which would ensure that blacks would be cut to size. Black would never become a threat to the country. Same doctor, same profession, two persons, but completely different responses and positions and attitudes. This happens, I would argue, because they lived and worked within different conceptual categories. Their thought apparatuses, their epistemological matrices were different. And the results are there for everyone to see. So it is not enough to have science. Unless and until science is infused with a certain measure of humanistic philosophy, it can be as destructive as anything else. Now we come to I mentioned all these things in order to drive a point home, and that is, when you approach a text, you have to bear a lot of things in mind, especially a treatises like Ratirahasya. We have to remember what a conceptual framework is, or a conceptual category is, then how different people belonging to the same historical age have produced diametrically opposite views because of different conceptual categories. And this work I need not say is old, and we cannot precisely date it. There are controversies regarding the very authorship, date, its validity, and so on. I am using a translation by S.C. Ubadhyaya. The book has received other translations, but I am sticking to one alone for methodological reasons. And this translation was published in 1965, 54 years ago. It runs into 244 pages. Not so interesting to read, even though it is titled Ratirahasya, because it doesn't discuss, of course it does discuss sex, but not the act of lovemaking alone. It is very much concerned with social norms, anatomy, and a lot of other things. And Ubadhyaya opines that Kokoka lived sometimes between AD 830 and 93, more than 1,000 years ago. And we cannot precisely date it. Dr. V. Raghavan, he was a very famous Sanskrit scholar. He retired from the University of Madras. He opines that the purpose of Kokoka is not merely to give us a compendium of the subject, but to bring into prominence the ideas of writers other than Valsiyayana. I feel this line is very interesting, and if we take this at its face value, it means Kokoka was performing some kind of a subaltern historiographic writing, because he was trying to bring back a lot of forgotten, marginal authors. Usually we have a tendency to associate the whole of all the works of literature with Kama Sutra alone. But Dr. Raghavan opines that Kokoka was trying to rediscover. He was trying to rediscover a lot of forgotten authors. Of course, the text does have some evidence. And there is an interesting, frame story. Frame story, that's a technical word about the work. One day, a woman came to the court of King Bhoja, and this woman was burning all over because of her sexual passion, the scorching passion, and no one was able to satiate her sexual desire. She came to the king's presence and asked for someone who could satisfy her. The king was, of course, confused. He was unable to do that. Actually, no one dared. Finally, an old Brahmin, he was old, but a Brahmin, he stood up and took the woman home. We don't know what happened next, but the next day, she came to the court, a completely transformed person, with her head bowed down, wearing a pakka sari, a kulastri of sorts. And everyone was surprised. And I like this story because of another reason. In popular visual representations, the bad girl is always pictured as wearing a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. And we have teachers of science who opine that autistic children are born because women wear jeans. We are living in such a society. And a teacher of zoology opining on a stage that autistic children are born because women and girls are idiotic enough to wear jeans. Okay. Secondly, when the girl falls in love, what happens? Her sartorial appearance changes. She starts to wear a pakka churidar and the other part. And after the marriage, what happens? It is a sari. Similarly, there is a transformation. Her body had become cooled. Yesterday it was hot, now it is cool. So everyone was astounded. An old man has done something impossible. And just like the males of Kerala today, I think males are always the same all the time. They were always baffled by the sexuality of women. And everyone wanted to know, how did you do this? And the Brahmin was generous enough to tell the secret. He didn't merely tell, he wrote a book that is called Ratirahasya. But don't believe it, you are not going to become a Casanova by reading this book. But the frame story is quite interesting in itself. See, this book, as I told you, discusses a lot of issues, but my concern is very simple. I am going to look at one particular aspect, which can roughly be expressed as our obsession, our uncanny concern with Varna. In this book, women are divided into four. Have you seen the movie Trivandrum Lodge? In Trivandrum Lodge, there is an interesting character played by P. Balachandran. He claims to have had sex with 999 women, and he's waiting for the next to cross as if he were going to set a record. Maybe Guinness people are waiting for the next woman. In this particular character, I don't remember the name of the character. Whenever he sees a woman, he would pass a comment, and she is Padmini. She is Shankini. And what is it? At that time I thought Padmini was a girl he was in love with. This woman is like Padmini. That was what I understood. No. This person is actually referring to the division of women which we can find in this particular book, Ratirahasya. Not that Kokoka invented this thing single-handedly. Such divisions can be found in a lot of works, including Kama Shastra. But the point is, Kama Shastra is much earlier. The date is contested, of course, let us say 4th century. And this is somewhere between 9th or 10th centuries. And what happened in between? When we come to Ratirahasya, classification is the most important aspect. But in Kama Sutra, classification is there, but not very important. So what might have contributed to the excessive concern with classification? I think for that we should look into general history. One argument is that 8th and 9th centuries are considered the age of the Brahmanistic revival. Buddhism was obliterated. Brahmins came back with a bang. So they insisted on such divisions. This can be one reason. This is a hypothetical explanation, but still it is possible, I don't know, probable. Anyway, I have drawn a rather big table which is not easy to read, I am afraid. This is the idea. On the left hand side you can see different aspects of the body. Body in general, cohesion, water, contact, vagina, gait, voice, build, clothes, food, sexual behavior, best posture, best time, won over by whom. And then you have got the 4 divisions: Padmini, Chitrini, Shankini and Hastini. Padmini, Chitrini, Shankini, Hastini. Since we don't have much time, I believe that even though the words are Padmini, Chitrini, Shankini and Hastini, they correspond with the 4-fold division of Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. It is not possible to read all the words, but let us take a few, and in order to save time, let us read only the first and the last to see the contrast. In the case of Padmini, her body is soft, her eyes are scarlet, and her nose is delicate. Just like the nose of Mammootty, we call it an aquiline nose, thin, long. Let us jump to Hastini. What is Hastini, by the way? Hasta. Like an elephant. Like an elephant, clumsy feet, crooked toes, tawny hair, extremely fat. While reading this, I am reminded of that old nursery rhyme. Chubby cheeks, rosy lips. It can be read in the same way. Both are prescriptive. So in the case of Hastini, she is, what is that? Ugly. Even though ugly is a relative term. Cohesion water. The cohesion water of Padmini smells like lotus. And lotus is a symbol of a major political party in India too. And what about the last one, Hastini? Elephant rot. It's a different question whether anyone had the time or the audacity to check such delicate details, I don't know. But the point is, the classification is comprehensive. Nothing is spared. Okay. Then, her behavior. Padmini worships Brahmins, preceptors, gurus, etc. And what about Hastini? Cruel. Just Shudras. Cruel. Gait. Padmini walks like a swan, whereas Hastini walks without grace. Then voice. The voice of Padmini is pleasing like a swan, whereas the voice of Hastini is choked, halting and indistinct. What about build? Padmini is very thin, whereas Hastini is corpulent, fat. Clothes. Actually, I didn't find anything about the clothes worn by Hastini. That is why the column is blank. Are we to understand that Hastini didn't wear anything? I don't know. Maybe a close reading will give the information. I didn't get the time to do that. Then food. Padmini eats little or moderate, soft and clean, mild. And what about Hastini? Glutton, more than required, bitter or pungent. In short, anything goes. She is more like a pig. So, and there are a lot of items. I request you to go through the divisions. Best time, who can be won by the last one. We will read the last one. Who can win Padmini? She is considered above such things. You cannot win a Padmini woman. Then there is a question. Who is she going to have relations with? You cannot win her. Maybe she will be generous enough to accept someone. Let us hope so. But what about Hastini? Ash of the feathers of a pigeon and a buzzing bee mixed with honey. Urudaram, sort of black magic. നമുക്കിവിടെ പത്രത്തിൽ മാതൃഭൂമിയിൽ പരസ്യം കാണാറുണ്ടല്ലോ, ആഭിചാര യന്ത്രം, സ്ത്രീകളെ ഹൗ ടു വിൻ, വശീകരണ യന്ത്രം. എക്സാക്ട്ലി, ദിസ് ഈസ് സോർട്ട് ഓഫ് എ വശീകരണം. ആൻഡ് ജസ്റ്റ് ഹാവ് എ ലുക്ക് അറ്റ് ദ സ്റ്റഫ്. ആഷ് ഓഫ് ദ ഫെദേഴ്സ് ഓഫ് എ പീജിയൻ ആൻഡ് എ ബസിംഗ് ബീ മിക്സ്ഡ് വിത്ത് honey. The concoction is repulsive. So this table speaks volumes about the kind of mental structure, the mindset which into the production of this work. And this work, and not this work alone. Most of the works betray such an unhealthy obsession with fourfold divisions. I repeat, even though the word Brahmin or Kshatriya is not mentioned here, the categories are unmistakable, and we will come to another situation in which those words are clearly mentioned. This is a picture of Padmini. This is not a photograph but a picture which I took from the book. Anyway, it is clear she is lean and her vital statistics are exemplary and she has got a graceful look. This is Chitrini, and if you know drawing and anatomy, you can read a lot of things into it. Shankini. This is poor Hastini. So fat, ugly, without grace, not attractive. Right? So these are the ways in which women were categorized. In other words, were they humans to be looked at and classified in such a way? Often no. That is why this poses another interesting issue. This classification often reduces women into the status of passive objects of the powerful male gaze. Okay. Of course, to be fair, the book contains other systems of classification also. One reason could be that this work incorporates a lot of obscure authors. At that time, it was not a standard practice to acknowledge all the sources and authors. He just took other systems of classification. So what happens? Women are divided into mare, M-A-R-E, deer and elephant types. Here there are only 3. What's a mare, by the way? Mare is the female one of a horse. Yeah, it's a horse. A female horse, deer and elephant types. Again, the physical and sexual features are different. They are also divided on the basis of age, humor and character traits. Humor, I think humor means our theory of humors, color, body humors, not the condition of being funny. Right. This is another picture, mare type of a woman. I looked to find any similarity with the 4 pictures we saw, but I couldn't. That is why I said, if you know drawing, you can see through the lines. There should be some kind of similarity. There should be some points of intersection, but I am not the right person to talk about that. This is the next type. This was clear. Elephant was okay. Apart from that, the other 2 pictures were a bit baffling. Men are also classified, but in comparison it is negligible. there are only a few paragraphs which dwell with the division of men. This happens because it was men who divided women. But in order to do a little bit of justice, they divided themselves also. Divisions are hair type, bull type, and horse type. Here we have got horse. In the case of women, it is mare, M-A-R-E. And there is the specification about the ideal union too. These ideal unions are something important because generally speaking, in the context of India, there are two systems of marriage. One is called Anuloma and the other one is called Pratiloma. Anuloma is okay. For example, a Brahmin marries a Shudra woman. It's all right. In Kerala, we have the famous Nayar Sambandhams. But the reverse was never permitted. And there is a specific name for a child born from the relation between a Shudra man and a Brahmin woman. It is called Chandala. Okay, Chandala is a person who is born from the sexual union between a Shudra man and a Brahmin woman. And there are other names also which I am unable to recall right now. For example, a Vaishya man has relations with a Brahmin woman. It was very serious. It was very serious, and the authorities took such relations very seriously. There are names for all such products of Pradiloma Vivahas. The rest is okay. These are the ideal union. Deer woman and hare man, mare woman and bull man, elephant woman and horseman. The last one I found really funny. Elephant and horse. Again, don't take things literally and at the face value. Maybe these animals, these images had associations which we are unable to understand now. After 1200 years, we should know what an elephant or a horse stood for during those days. Anyway, according to this book, these are the best, most advisable ideal unions. And there is another category, high unions. I don't know what is the difference between an ideal union and a high union. Maybe it is like A grade and A plus grade. Something still better. Deer woman and bull man, mare woman and horseman. Here it is okay because mare and horse, same animal. The only difference is in sex, gender. Apart from that, they are one and the same, and it is more sensible. This is excessively high union. Maybe excellent, outstanding grade. What that is? Deer woman and horseman. Man is horse, man is imagined as horse, and the woman is imagined as a smaller creature. These are low unions, which are not so advisable. Mare woman and hare man, elephant woman and bull man. Actually, I wanted to do something like a structuralist analysis of these unions and to find out an underlying logic. There should be a logic. The only problem is these classifications and names are so numerous that we get confused. But we need not. If we sit back, take a lot of time and closely analyze, we can identify a logic, the abstract logic, the grammar behind such classifications and unions. And again, excessively low union, elephant woman and hare man. So these are some of the ideas about females, their divisions and sexual unions mentioned in the book Ratirahasya, which is pretty old, as we have mentioned more than once. Now let us make a move from the northern space to Kerala. As I told you at the beginning of the presentation that after some time I would bring in a few slides from a different area of study to substantiate the argument that our concern with Varna is not territorially limited. It is not confined to one place or one period of time. It is pervasive. In the case of India, it can be described as universal. It's there almost all the time, everywhere, in virtually in every space of action and thinking. This is a slide from the book പത്തൊമ്പതാം നൂറ്റാണ്ടിലെ കേരളം by the famous writer P. Bhaskaranunni. I don't dare to call him a historian as such because this work does not argue anything, but this big book running into some 700 or 800 pages provides direct quotations from a lot of primary sources. And if you ask me to recommend a book which should be made compulsory for undergraduate program on any day, I would recommend this. Any 30 pages from this book. From any 30 pages from this book should be made compulsory reading, because whether it is caste or clothes or food, it tells us how Malayalis lived and thought in the 19th century. Simply because of that, we will never do that, because we are a people afraid of past. That is why history becomes so dangerous, because historians have the nasty habit of, exhuming past. We are painfully creating glorified traditions and try to be the protectors of great faiths, and these historians come and say that, no, things were very bad in the past. We don't like them. That is why many people hate history, I feel. Even students don't like it, because students are also trying to wallow in sort of, constructed traditions and identities. And in this book, he talks about a branch of knowledge which can roughly be called botany. The word is Vriksha Ayurvedam. Vriksha Ayurvedatil മരങ്ങൾക്ക് പോലും 4 വർണ്ണങ്ങൾ കൽപ്പിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നു. Now Bhaskaranunni quote, ഖനം കുറഞ്ഞതും മൃദുത്വമുള്ളതും മറ്റു മരങ്ങളോട് കൂട്ടിച്ചേർക്കാൻ പ്രയാസമില്ലാത്തതുമാണ് ബ്രാഹ്മണ ജാതിയിൽപ്പെട്ട മരങ്ങൾ. നോക്കൂ, പത്മിനിയെ പോലെ തന്നെയാണ്, കനം കുറഞ്ഞ്, ലൈറ്റ്, ഡെലിക്കേറ്റ്, സോഫ്റ്റ്. ദോസ് ഫീച്ചേഴ്സ് ആർ അൺമിസ്റ്റേക്കബിൾ. ഇനി ക്ഷത്രിയ വർഗത്തിലുള്ളതിന് ഉറപ്പും, അടുത്ത വാക്കെന്താ, മൃദുത്വവും ഉള്ളതായിരിക്കും. പക്ഷെ വേറൊരു പ്രശ്നമുണ്ട്, യു കനോട്ട് കമ്പൈൻ ക്ഷത്രിയ വുഡ്സ് വിത്ത് എനി അതർ പീസ് ഓഫ് വുഡ്. ക്ഷത്രിയ വർഗത്തിലുള്ള മരങ്ങളെ കൊണ്ടാണ് കപ്പലുകൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കേണ്ടതും ആവക നൗകകൾ സുഖകരവും സമ്പത്തും തരുമെന്നും ഭോജൻ അഭിപ്രായപ്പെടുന്നു. That's very interesting, because even though Brahmins are considered the best, they are too delicate to have ships and other things. But Kshatriyas combine the Brahminic qualities plus might, vigor. So they are the best for the construction of ships. വിവിധ ജാതികളിലെ സ്ത്രീകൾക്ക് സൂതിക, പ്രസവത്തിനുള്ള വീട്, അത്ര അർത്ഥമേ ഉള്ളൂ. അവിടെ പോലും പല മരങ്ങളിലുള്ള കട്ടിലുകൾ സുശ്രുതൻ നിർദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നുണ്ട് അത്രേ. അത് ഒരു സ്ത്രീക്ക് ഇഷ്ടമുള്ള മരം ചൂസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. ഡിപ്പെൻഡിങ് ഓൺ യുവർ വർണ്ണ, എവറിഥിങ് ഈസ് സെറ്റ് ഫോർ യു. ബ്രാഹ്മണ, ക്ഷത്രിയ, വൈശ്യ, ശൂദ്രന്മാർക്ക് യഥാക്രമം വൈറ്റ്, റെഡ്, യെല്ലോ, ബ്ലാക്ക്. ഫോർ ബ്രാഹ്മണ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് വൈറ്റ്, ഫോർ ശൂദ്ര ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് black. We are skipping the middle 2 terms, the 2 terms in the middle. So it is, one is white and the other one is black. Just have a look at the spectrum. You begin with white and ends with black. Here we have to be cautious about one thing, because another system can have different values for these colors. When I was talking about a similar subjects 5 years ago in a university, one of the listeners stood up and said, in Kerala mural art, black has got completely different associations. Something positive. Since I had never seen a mural in situ, in real setting, I said maybe I will try to check it, but I didn't do that, but it's possible. Okay, we cannot insist that these colors have universal values and semiotic values. They can vary, but here the pattern is logical. In the case of Brahmins, it is white. In the case of Shudra, it is black. Now, we will take, this is from, it's a paper we are working now about toxicology, Vishachikilsa in Kerala. These are the attributes of snakes in Kerala, snakes in India. Snakes are also divided into 4. I wrongly typed the word caste. It is actually Varna, not caste. Have a look at it again. Snakes are divided into Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. Color, smell. Again, I wonder who had the guts to smell a snake and to record it. Then time of travel, food, habitat. Let us concentrate on the first and the last column alone. In the case of a Brahmin snake, the color is golden. Golden, whereas, what about the poor Shudra snake? Black. ചേരെ നീർക്കോലിയൊക്കെയാവും തോന്നുന്നു ശൂദ്രപ്പാമ്പുകൾ, പാവങ്ങൾ. എന്തിനും. But in the case of Brahmin, it is golden. And what about smell? Ashtagandha. A Brahmin snake smells Ashtagandha, whereas a Shudra smells honey and milk. Time of travel, morning. He is a decent fellow. He travels only in the morning. What about Shudra? Night. Nocturnal traveler. He is a dangerous customer. What about food? The Brahmin snakes doesn't anything except air. That is enough. Because he has got that, divine grace in him so that he can manage even without food. Have you noticed some of our yogis, they claim to eat little. They say that is not necessary because we have got some powers with which we can survive. So food becomes redundant. It is only common people like you and me that food becomes a major concern. And what about the Shudra snake? Anything. Just like the Hastini woman. Anything. Whatever comes your way, you eat. You are a glutton. Even this snake is pictured as a glutton. And where does the Brahmin snake live? Habitat, mountain or forest. It is in mountains or forest that our rishis, they live and meditate. What about Shudra? Near water body. That is why I suspect Shudra snakes consist of water snake and others. So in between some of the rather interesting Vaishyas travel in the evening. They eat frog, salt, meat. So there is a mention of non-vegetarian dish. Of course, we know snakes eat frogs and other puny little creatures, but it is specifically mentioned. So this is the way in which knowledge production in India was structured, at least for a very long time. Not that there were dissident voices, not that there were heterogeneous traditions. There must have been, but somehow or other, these things have come to be identified as the a priori mode of our knowledge production. From a treatise on lovemaking to toxicology. So how do you explain this? Are we to understand that all the places in the current national state of India were integrated and intellectually connected? That need not necessarily be the case because we compiled this table from 3 different books on toxicology. All of them are in Malayalam. But if you closely examine them, it is not difficult to understand that they are unofficial translations of Sanskrit books. The fact is not mentioned. See, 100 years ago, it was a standard practice. People would translate and present it as an original work. The best example from literature can be the novel Akbar by Keralavarma Valiya Koyithampuran. Many people still believe that it is an original work. No, it is actually the translation of a work in Hindustani. But it was not specifically mentioned. Right. So it is quite natural. Our authors in Kerala took some Sanskrit texts, translated them into Malayalam. Naturally, in the process of translation, they knowingly or unknowingly imported all the cognitive mechanisms of the Sanskritic knowledge traditions. This must have been the case. Now, the British played a major role in giving legitimacy to this kind of Sanskritic knowledge, which can be described as Shastric discourses. They came to India and in no time they started a grand project of collecting manuscripts, studying them, translating them, documenting all our rites and rituals and practices. And there was a reason behind it. They did not knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Their needs, their considerations were purely pragmatic. And here is a mention from Sir Charles Episton, who played a prominent role in such operations. Remember his date of death, he died in 1908. So much before that, they had started such operations, and in all these projects, they considered Brahmins as the default authority. Right. So they recorded whatever the Brahmins said, conveniently forgetting that there were other people outside. Actually, the majority of the people lived outside this Brahminical framework of things. Everywhere, that is the case. But they were left out. That is why we have to talk about subaltern historiography these days. There are millions of people who died, who lived and died, but left no traces, which can be admitted into the frameworks of traditional historical writing. So it's a case of women. That is why we often talk about subaltern and women in one stroke. So women's histories are largely left out. As I told you, there is a process of rediscovery these days. Now we had a seminar right here, year before last. The short stories written by women in Malayalam, and all of these stories were published between 1905 and 1915. 1920 okay, anyway, so in the last 10, and many people, and at first it was amazing because we didn't even know about any women short story writer except one or two. Usually our literary histories begin with Saraswati Amma, but she lived only in the 1930s or 40s or even later. But there were a good number of women, and one of the stories was so amusing. It is titled Thalachorallatha Pennungal. Thalachorallatha Pennungal. A woman writes about such a thing, and the storyline is simple. A woman accepts a pseudonym, a male pseudonym, and writes, becomes extremely successful. And why did she choose this pseudonym? Because at that time, no one was practically willing to accept the existence of a woman as a writer. That could be the reason. Anyway, let us read his words because they are very important. He says, "Our ignorance of the customs and beliefs of the people among whom we dwell is a reproach to us. Because not only does that ignorance deprive European science of material which it greatly needs," please read that portion once again. European science needs a lot of material. Sarah Bartman was a material. Scientists also studied her. Elephant Man Joseph Merrick was a material. Even though the doctor saved him, he had his own intentions. The doctor spent a lot of time studying the so-called deformities and wanted to arrive at new theories if possible. That is one thing, but also involves a distinct loss of administrative powers to ourselves. So there are two things. We should know the local customs so that our scientists can study them, so that our knowledge production becomes better, gets augmented. At the same time, the ignorance of indigenous customs and practices are a disadvantage in day-to-day administrative matters. This mindset is very important, and the real reason behind census is not the improvement of Indians. They wanted to understand what were the resources we had. That is why different regions had different prices and taxes. The considerations were more than practical. Of course, it has nothing to do with the topic we have been discussing, but point is that from this mindset, Europeans, specifically the British, saw things. Naturally, they consulted, they always went for shortcuts. Whenever they were in doubt regarding the validity of a custom, they would approach a set of Brahmins and believe them blindly. This caused a lot of damage to local traditions and ordinary people. This must have been the case with Ratirahasya too, I guess. It got glorified because it was written by a Brahmin. But again, don't take that Ratirahasya captured the essence of the entire age, or the arguments of the author are scientifically right. It can work as an index, a point of entry to the complex and amazing world of how knowledge was a weapon of power, how knowledge aided in possessing and wielding power in the past. So that's all for the time being. And if you have any doubts regarding the text and what I said, feel free to raise them.